It was Christmas, and my Uncle Rick had graciously invited the whole family over for what he called a friendly game of poker. But just as everyone was taking their seats, he announced, "We're not playing for pennies. If we're gonna play, we play for real." The relatives chuckled nervously. "How real are we talking, Rick?" He unzipped a duffel bag and slammed 10 stacks of cash onto the table. 10,000 a hand. If you don't have the bankroll, don't sit at the table. An awkward silence fell over the room. One by one, they shook their heads, admitting they couldn't afford stakes that high. They flattered him instead, calling him a big shot, a high roller, even during a family gathering. Rick puffed out his chest, soaking in the praise. He launched into a lecture about how they needed to be more ambitious or they'd be poor their whole lives, too broke to even play a real man's game. That's when I quietly walked to the table. "Uncle Rick," I said, "I'll play with you." "You?" Everyone stared. Rick looked stunned for a second, then a condescending smirk stretched across his face. "Leo, my boy. Don't you make a few grand a month? Is this a joke?" I smiled faintly. "I got a decent Christmas bonus this year. Enough to keep you company for a few hands." We all knew what this was really about. Rick wasn't playing poker, he was performing. A full one-man show titled "Look How Rich I Am." I'd been putting up with him for days. The moment I'd returned for the holidays and brought my dad a bottle of vintage Macallan, Rick had scoffed, "Your dad's a simple farmer. Does he even have the palate to appreciate that?" If my dad hadn't physically held me back, I would have exploded right then. But if Rick wanted to use a simple game to trample on the dignity of his own family, then I saw no reason to treat him like family anymore. Well, Rick sneered, "Look at you doing all right for yourself. A bonus that big is almost what I make in a week. Just don't come crying when it's all gone." I looked at him, disgusted. It was the same thing every year. Christmas started warm, then Rick, who owned a small-time logistics company, would start lording his success over everybody. Bragging to strangers was one thing, but what kind of person needed to feel superior to his own blood? This year, I'd had enough. "Don't worry. I can afford to lose," I said coldly. "I'm more worried you won't pay up when you lose." Rick's laugh was sharp. "100 grand is nothing to me. You think I'm like you, scraping by on one bonus a year? Your dad told me you're saving for a down payment. Would be a real shame if your fiancé left you when you're broke. Don't blame me when it happens." His words hung in the air. Even the other relatives winced. What kind of uncle said something like that? "Is anyone else joining us?" I asked the room. You need more than 2 people for a real game. But no one wanted to get caught in the crossfire. They all shook their heads. Rick rolled his eyes. "Bunch of cowards. Can't even handle a $10,000 hand. How do you expect to get anywhere in life?" I narrowed my eyes at him. "If poker's a no-go, how about something more thrilling?" Rick leaned back with arrogant amusement. "Name your game." "Texas Hold'em. Blackjack. Craps. Dice. I'll play you in anything." Exactly what I wanted. "Dice," I said smoothly. "Simple. High roll wins." A triumphant grin spread across his face. "Fine by me. You're a kid, don't regret it." Everyone stared at me, horrified. Rick had spent years hustling in VIP lounges. Dice was his specialty. Playing him was like walking into a wolf's den. I asked for 2 sets of dice cups, his preferred setup. "Hold on," Rick said as I prepared to start. "Where's your money?" "Mine's on the table." I raised my phone. "Digital wallet. Who carries tens of thousands in cash these days? Unless they're trying to show off?" He snorted when he saw my balance. 50 grand? Not bad. That covers my pocket money for a couple weeks." I ignored the dig. We rolled. He lifted his cup first, 3 sixes, 2 fives. A powerful hand. I lifted mine. A straight, 1 through 5. I lost. Rick crowed, slapping the table. I silently transferred $10,000 to him. My dad stepped forward, panic in his eyes. "Rick, come on. The boy was only talking. Let's call it one game." "Don't bother me, old man," Rick snapped, not even calling him brother. He always treated my father that way. "It's okay, Dad," I said. Again. I lost the second round. Then the third. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. In minutes, the $50,000 was gone. Rick chortled. "What a good nephew. 50 grand gift to your uncle." He winked. "Don't worry, I'll take you to an exclusive club sometime. Show you how the world works." He stood up to leave. Wait, I said. He froze. What, you want more? I nodded. With what? He scoffed. We don't play on credit. I don't need credit, I said. I've got another 300,000 on my card. You idiot. My dad shouted, slapping his thigh. That's your down payment. You can't touch that. Rick pointed at him. See? That's your problem, old man. No vision. Let the kid play. My dad turned to me, voice trembling. Your mother and I saved our entire lives for that money. If you lose it, what are you going to do? I didn't answer. I transferred the entire amount. Rick's eyes gleamed. 10 grand a hand is slow. Let's raise it. 100,000 a roll. Best of 3. Done, I said. My dad slapped me on the back of the head. Are you insane? He's a hustler. I'm not going to lose, I murmured. We rolled again. Rick revealed his dice, 4 sixes and a 5. I lifted mine. 5 sixes. A perfect roll. The room exploded into gasps. You cheated. Rick sputtered. Check the dice, I said calmly. He did. They were clean. 1 lucky roll, he muttered. I smiled. Funny. You never call your wins luck. Rick slammed his fist down. Next roll. Now. We rolled again. He revealed 4 sixes and a 4. I revealed 5 sixes. Silence swallowed the room. My dad's knees nearly buckled. Even Aunt Carol looked shaken. This is impossible, Rick shouted. You're cheating. Check the dice again, I said. He did. Again, they were clean. He was sweating now, his confidence collapsing. 1 more roll, he snarled. $300,000. Winner takes all. I nodded. But if I win, you tell everyone the truth. Rick flinched. What truth? You know what? He hesitated, then pride forced him to accept. Fine. We picked up our cups. The room was so quiet we could hear the clock ticking. Rick shook his cup violently, muttering desperate prayers. I shook mine slowly. Remembering the letters I'd found 3 years earlier, proving Rick had lied about owing money to loan sharks, proving he'd stolen my dad's MIT future, proving he'd built his entire life on my father's sacrifice. This was my moment. Rick slammed his cup down and lifted it. 5 sixes. He roared in triumph. Yes. You lose. You're out of the family. Everyone stared at him, uneasy. I calmly lifted my cup. 5 sixes. 3 perfect rolls in a row. The room erupted. My dad hugged me, sobbing. The relatives clapped and cheered. Rick stood frozen, his face drained of color. You're not human, he whispered. I stepped toward him. I'm not the one who's been lying. Now keep your promise. No, he shouted. You can't make me. I can, I said quietly. Or I walk out with your money, and everyone will wonder why you're so scared. He hesitated. His breathing turned frantic. Then, in a moment that chilled the entire room, Rick pulled a gun from his waistband. Everyone froze. My dad stepped in front of me. Rick, put the gun down. This is family. Family? Rick laughed, wild-eyed. Family is a joke. Family is people who want to take what's yours. He pointed the gun at me. You think you can beat me? Expose me? I built this life with blood and lies. I'm not losing it to some kid. He tightened his grip. Just as he began to pull the trigger, the door burst open. Police officers stormed in, guns drawn. Police. Drop the weapon. Rick spun around, stunned. What? How did you get here? The cop closest to Rick didn't answer him. He just kept his gun trained on my uncle's chest and barked, drop it. Now. For a split second, I saw the calculation flicker across Rick's face. The same quick, greedy math he did at poker tables and in shady back rooms. Only this time, the odds weren't in his favor. His fingers twitched. My heart stopped. Rick. My dad shouted. Please. Don't do this. Not in front of the family. Not in front of the kids. Little cousins were clustered behind the sofa, wide-eyed and shaking. Aunt Carol had one hand over her mouth and the other pressed against her chest like she was holding her heart in place. Rick's gaze slid across the room. Over the money. Over my dad. Over me. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun and let it clatter onto the floor. The tension snapped like a rubber band. People exhaled all at once. Someone started sobbing. Step back, hands where we can see them, the officer ordered. Rick obeyed, but his eyes locked onto mine. There was no shame there. No regret. Just suspicion, and something like fear. This is harassment, he spat. You can't just storm into my house. I didn't do anything. I was defending myself. He threatened me. He stole from me. He jerked his chin at me. Ask him. The lead officer didn't even glance my way. We got the call, Mr. Ramirez. Multiple calls, actually. Threats with a firearm. Possible attempted assault. We're not here on a whim. Several family members flinched at our last name on the cop's tongue. It sounded wrong, said in that flat, official tone. My dad turned to me slowly, confusion etched into every line on his face. Leo, he whispered, what did you do? I swallowed, feeling every eye in the room digging into my skin. I called them, I said. The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't relief. It was disbelief. You called the police on your own uncle? Aunt Carol gasped. Rick laughed, high and hysterical. Of course he did. Little Leo always was soft. Can't win a game, calls in the government. You hear that, officers? This was just family fun. He lost money and got salty. The officer closest to me tilted his head. Sir, did you say you called us? I took a breath, forced my hands not to shake. Yeah. About 40 minutes ago. My dad stared. 40 minutes, before the gun? Before we even started playing, I said. Silence dropped over the room like a heavy blanket. Even the officers' faces tightened. I told dispatch, I continued, my voice steadier now, that there was a man with a history of violence, who had threatened my father before over money, and that tonight he was hosting a high-stakes gambling game at home, with kids present, while armed. That's a lie, Rick roared, lunging forward. Gun snapped back up in his direction. He froze again, chest heaving. It's not, I said softly. You just never expected anyone to call you on it. One of the officers stepped closer to Rick. Do you currently have any registered firearms, sir? Rick's jaw clenched. Yeah. Legal. Locked up. The officer nodded to another cop, who moved past Rick and down the hallway, presumably toward his bedroom. Funny, I said. Because that gun? I pointed to the one on the floor. It's not the one you showed off at Thanksgiving. That one had a silver slide. This one's all black. And I'm betting you didn't register both. The first officer shot me a quick, measuring look. He was starting to realize I hadn't just panicked and dialed 911. I'd planned this. Rick was trembling now, not with fear, but with rage. You little rat, he hissed. You set me up. The word sank into me like a stone. Rat. I'd heard him use it my whole life, for anyone who didn't play the way he wanted. Bartenders who cut him off. Employees who called in sick. My dad, when he dared to ask for the money Rick had borrowed. The dice cup was still in my hand. I looked down at it, at the table, at the perfect, impossible 5-6s still sitting in front of me. No, I thought. I didn't set you up. You did that yourself. But I did build the trap. Officers, I said quietly, can I show you something? The lead cop hesitated, then nodded. Make it quick. I pulled my phone out, opened the recordings, and tapped on one. The sound of Rick's voice filled the room. Listen, old man, you never had what it takes. I did you a favor taking that MIT spot from you. You would have flunked out and embarrassed the whole family. You should be thanking me. Besides, the loan sharks weren't bluffing. College or coffin, remember? I picked college. For me. My dad's face went chalk white. His lips parted, but no sound came out. I swiped to the next recording. This time Rick sounded drunk, his words slurred. If he ever brings that up again, I swear to God I'll put a bullet in his tractor tires, maybe his legs too. Guy still thinks he's owed something. Nobody gave me anything. I took it. That's what real men do. The cops listened, stone-faced. You recorded me? Rick whispered. In my own house? You did that in our barn, I said. When you cornered my dad last summer. I was behind the stack of fertilizer. You didn't hear me over the sound of your own voice. My dad finally managed to speak. Leo. Why didn't you tell me? Because it would have destroyed you, I thought. Because you still looked at your big brother like the boy who used to share his lunch with you, not the man who stole your future. Out loud, I said, because I needed more than just your word against his. I needed leverage. The officer nearest my dad stepped forward gently. Sir, is this true? Did your brother tell you he owed money to loan sharks and needed your college fund? Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears were tracking down his cheeks. He told me. Years ago. When we were kids. Our parents saved what they could, but they could only afford for one of us to go. I got an offer. MIT. His voice cracked on the letters. It was my dream. He looked at Rick, really looked at him, like he was seeing a stranger wearing his brother's face. You came home with bruises, Dad whispered. You said they'd hurt Mom if we didn't pay. You said my tuition money would clear the debt and you'd work to pay us back so I could go later. His shoulders started to shake. I believed you. We all believed you. Mom cried and said she'd rather see me safe at home than dead in some city. We gave you everything. The room was so still I could hear the radiator ticking. Rick's face contorted. For a second, I thought I saw something like guilt. And then it hardened back into contempt. So what? He snapped. I did what I had to do. Look at me now. House. Company. Cars. You still have your little farm. You're fine. Fine? My dad's voice rose, wild and raw. I have spent my whole life wondering what might have been, Rick. Every winter in that drafty house, every time a piece of equipment broke and I had to duct tape it together because we couldn't afford a new one, I told myself it was worth it, because you were alive. Because we saved you. He laughed, this broken, stunned laugh. And you were never in danger at all. My chest ached. I wanted to go to him, to hold him up, but the part of me that had been planning this for 3 years knew we weren't done yet. There's more, I said. I scrolled to the bank documents, the scans I'd pulled from the old safety deposit box in town. I showed the officers the forged signature on the tuition withdrawal. The matching handwriting samples. The fake loan repayment ledger Rick had filed for tax purposes. One of the officers whistled under his breath. The lead one didn't bother to hide the flicker of interest now. Mr. Ramirez, he said to Rick slowly, do you mind if we take a look at your office? For your business records? Rick actually took a step back. You need a warrant. We have cause to secure the scene, given the weapon, the officer said evenly. If you'd like us to get a warrant, we can certainly do that too. We know the judge on call tonight. Shouldn't take long. The panic finally broke through Rick's bravado. He turned to the rest of the family like they might come to his rescue. You're just going to let this happen? He demanded. I'm your blood. I pay for your kids' school shoes, your car insurance, your... Aunt Carol flinched. You hold it over our heads every time, she whispered. Every dinner, every birthday. You give with one hand and slap with the other. Uncle Marco, usually quiet, spoke up from the corner. You said if I didn't cover that shipment for you, you'd tell my boss about the side jobs, he said. You weren't helping me, Rick. You were blackmailing me. One by one, voices rose around the room, listing favors Rick had done that suddenly didn't sound like charity anymore. He looked around, stunned, as if the room had turned on him all at once. As if he hadn't been robbing them of dignity and slow, careful cuts for years. You're all ungrateful, he snarled. Every last one of you. None of you would have anything without me. His eyes landed on the money. Stacks and stacks of crisp bills glinting under the kitchen lights. Officers, I said, that money is evidence in an illegal gambling operation involving an unlicensed firearm and potential fraud. The lead cop nodded. We'll be bagging it. Rick lurched toward the table. 2 officers slammed him face down and cuffed him before he got close. Get off me, he shouted, voice cracking. You can't take my money. That's mine. I earned it. Leo, tell them. I walked to the edge of the table and looked down at him. For a moment, I remembered being 7, sitting on his lap while he taught me how to shuffle cards. Remembered his booming laugh, his bear hugs, the way he'd slip me a $10 bill and tell me not to tell my parents. Then I remembered my dad, hands cracked and bleeding from winter work, saying maybe next year when you asked why you couldn't go to the science camp in the city. I remembered the letters I found 3 years ago, yellowing in a box in the attic, addressed from MIT to Miguel Ramirez, my father. Congratulations on your admission. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. You earned this. He stared up at me, eyes bloodshot, breathing ragged. You think you won, kid? You think this makes you better than me? 3 years ago, I might have shouted yes. Tonight, strangely, I didn't feel like gloating. I felt tired. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and my lungs were finally burning. No, I said. It doesn't make me better than you. The dice weren't fair either. My dad jerked his head up. What do you mean? The officers paused. I swallowed and opened my palm. In it lay a second pair of dice, identical to the ones on the table. 3 years ago, Thanksgiving, I said, I watched you hustle Aunt Carol's boss in the back room with lucky dice. Waited. You called it a harmless trick. I memorized the brand, the little imperfections in the paint. I set my pair next to Rick's on the table. Side by side, they were twins. These aren't weighted like yours, I said. But they are influenced. Tiny metal cores. Magnets under the table. I tapped the underside where I duct taped the narrow strip just before dinner, while everyone was in the living room singing along to Mariah Carey. My dad looked like I had slapped him. Leo. I'm not saying this to save him, I said, nodding at Rick. Nothing about his choices changes. The gun, the threats, the stolen tuition, the fraud. But I rigged my odds tonight. I made perfect rolls possible. I wanted to beat him at his own game so badly that I became him for a minute. My voice broke on the last word. The room was utterly silent. The lead cop cleared his throat. Son, what you're describing. That's not something we're here to charge you with. But it does matter that you said it. I know, I said. It matters to me. The moral high ground I'd been standing on wobbled, cracked. I could see the edge now, how easy it would have been to push Rick off and tell myself he deserved it. My dad stepped toward me slowly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. Why didn't you just send those letters to the police? He asked, voice hoarse. Or to a lawyer? Why? This? Because that wouldn't have fixed the look in your eyes, I thought. The way you still flinched when Rick raised his voice. The way he turned Christmas into a stage and you into a prop. I'd wanted more than justice. I'd wanted humiliation. I'd wanted theater. I thought if everyone saw him lose, I said out loud, really lose, it would break his spell. I thought you needed to see him like this to believe you were never beneath him. Dad studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're right, he said. But I also needed to see you choose not to become him. He turned to the officers. Take him, he said quietly. Do what you have to do. But, if there's any way, I'd like whatever restitution or fines to go back to the family. To his employees. They don't deserve to go down with him. Rick's eyes bulged. You can't. One of the officers pushed him toward the door. You might want to save that for your lawyer, sir. They read him his rights in our entryway, next to the wreath my mom had hung that morning. The red bow looked too bright under the flashing lights of the squad car outside. Half the family drifted to the window, watching as they shoved Rick into the back seat. Snow had started to fall, soft and indifferent, blanketing the driveway in white. When the door finally closed, the house sagged into a strange, hollow quiet. I stared at the money still on the table, now neatly stacked and tagged with evidence markers. It looked smaller somehow. Less like a mountain, more like just paper. Leo, my mom said gently, touching my arm. Your savings. I shook my head. That account was never the down payment. My dad blinked. What? I pulled up my banking app and scrolled to another screen. I wired the down payment for the house last month, I said. Different account. You just never check your email, so when the realtor sent the confirmation. You bought the house? Mom gasped. Already? In your names, I said. Happy early retirement. My dad just stared at me, jaw hanging open. For a second, I thought he might actually faint. Then, what was this money? He asked. My bonus, I said. And some extra. Some extra, he repeated faintly. $350,000 is some extra? I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling raw and exposed. The startup I joined 2 years ago sold its software to a fund. I got equity. I didn't want to say anything until I knew it was real. Then I started thinking about what to do with it, and this idea wouldn't let go. My dad laughed weakly. You sound like him, he said, nodding toward the door Rick had been dragged through. Talking about deals and big wins. I know, I said. That scares me more than anything. I looked around at the family, at my cousins, at Aunt Carol and Uncle Marco, at my parents. Their faces were a messy mix of relief, shock, judgment, and something like hope. I can't undo what I did tonight, I said. I rigged the game. I walked you all into a scene I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. I wanted him to fall in front of you, the way he made you all feel small. I took a breath. But I can choose what happens next. The money the police don't keep as evidence? It's not going to me. It goes back to you all. To anyone he overcharged, underpaid, or cornered. I'll help a lawyer trace it. I'll pay for the lawyer, too. Aunt Carol shook her head. Leo, you don't have to. I do, I said. If I walk out of here richer and smugger while he goes to jail, that's just a different kind of Rick. I don't want that. My dad was crying openly now, silent tears carving lines down his weathered cheeks. He stepped forward, grabbed me by the shoulders, and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. I don't care about the money, he whispered into my ear. I care that you're not him. That's all I ever cared about. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and soap and the cheap aftershave he'd worn for years. For the first time, it didn't smell like what might have been. It smelled like home. Behind us, I heard my younger cousin whisper, "Is Christmas ruined now?" I pulled back, wiped my face, and turned around. "No," I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. "It's just different." We ended up ordering cheap takeout because no one had the energy to finish cooking. The kids ate in their pajamas, crowding around the TV, which we kept muted. Every time a news alert flashed at the bottom of the screen, my stomach twisted, but I forced myself to keep breathing. By midnight, half the family had left. The other half was asleep in guest rooms and on couches, tucked under extra blankets. I found my dad in the kitchen, alone, staring at the empty spot on the table where the money had been. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about those letters," he said. "About that acceptance. I threw the others away years ago. I only kept the first one. Proof that, once, someone thought I was good enough." "You were good enough," I said. "You still are." He smiled sadly. "I used to imagine a different life. City apartment. Lab coat. Maybe a different wife, different kid." He glanced at me. "Then tonight I realized something." "What?" "If I had gone, there's no guarantee I would have finished. No guarantee your mother and I would have met the same way. No guarantee you'd exist." He shrugged. "I lost a dream. But I got a family. A stubborn, infuriating, sneaky son who hides magnets under tables." "Hey," I said softly. "Too soon." He chuckled, then grew serious again. "I don't forgive your uncle for what he did," he said. "I might never. But I also don't want you to spend your life chasing ways to hurt him back. He's already trapped in the only prison that ever mattered." "Which is?" "His own ego." Dad tapped his temple. "Bars of solid gold." We stood there in quiet for a while, the hum of the fridge filling the space between us. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll call a lawyer. A good one. We'll figure out what to do with the evidence and the money and the business mess." "And MIT?" I asked. He smiled. "MIT will be fine without me. But they won't be fine without you, if you ever decide to knock on their door for a partnership. You're the one who took what you had and built something new, Leo. That's what they look for." I thought of the code I'd written late into the night, the models I'd trained on my aging laptop at the farm's kitchen table. The investors who'd laughed until the numbers shut them up. The contract that had wired more money into my account than my dad had made in the last decade. For the first time, I considered not how far behind I was, but how far ahead I might go. "I'm not sure what I want yet," I admitted. "Grad school. Another startup. Maybe something boring and safe." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said. "Tonight, you just have to sleep." As I headed upstairs, I paused in the hallway outside the guest room where Rick usually stayed. The bed was neatly made, the suitcase still open, shirt spilling out. On the nightstand lay a framed photo of all of us from years ago, me at 12, gap-toothed and grinning, clinging to his arm. My dad on the other side, looking younger, hopeful, unaware. I picked up the frame and studied our faces. If I squinted, I could almost believe we were still that family. Before the loans, the lies, the gun. I set the photo face down. In my old room, I lay awake listening to the distant hum of the highway and the soft snore of my parents down the hall. My mind replayed the sound of dice clattering inside plastic cups, the click of a safety being released, the bark of police commands. I thought about how close I'd come to never seeing another Christmas. I also thought about the small square of metal still duct taped under the table. In the morning, before anyone else woke up, I crept downstairs and peeled the magnet off. It came away with a faint rip of tape, leaving a dark rectangle of residue on the wood. I held it in my hand for a long moment, feeling its quiet pull on the nails in the table legs, on the screws in the chair. Then I walked out to the barn, opened the old toolbox by the wall, and dropped the magnet in. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. Maybe I wasn't ready to let go of that part of me, the one who calculated odds and set traps and refused to be the victim ever again. But I did close the lid. For now, that was enough. Later, when the sun broke through the clouds and turned the snowy fields into a blinding expanse of light, I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee and watched my dad step out onto the front step beside me. "This place is really ours now," he said. "No more favors. No more strings." "Yeah," I said. "Ours." Far away, somewhere in a holding cell, Rick was probably shouting about lawyers and conspiracies and ungrateful relatives. For years, he'd been the center of our universe, everything revolving around his moods, his money, his approval. Tonight, for the first time, I felt the pole shift. Christmas would never be the same. But maybe that was a good thing. Maybe next year, when we sat around that table, the only thing anyone would gamble on was who had to do the dishes. And if the kids wanted to learn a game, I'd teach them one where the odds weren't stacked, the rules were clear, and nobody had to lose for someone else to win.